My son's kind girlfriend came to our house with a busted lip and a black eye, so I showed my son what it's like to be the weaker person and disowned him. My stepfather used to physically terrorize my mother and beat my 3 younger brothers and me regularly throughout my childhood. I have 4 siblings total, 2 of them being my half-sisters from my mother's previous marriage. Being the eldest at home, I constantly tried to shield them from his violence by redirecting his explosive rage toward myself instead, often lying about breaking things or starting fights just to draw his attention away from the younger kids. The beatings were brutal and unpredictable. He'd use his belt, wooden spoons, or just his fists depending on his mood and how much he'd been drinking that day. My mother was too terrified and financially dependent to leave him, so we all learned to walk on eggshells and hide whenever we heard his truck pulling into the driveway. When I finally grew tall enough and strong enough at 17, I confronted my stepfather directly after catching him slapping my youngest sister for spilling juice on his newspaper. That confrontation changed everything in our household, and I swore I'd never tolerate that kind of brutality again in any form, whether I witnessed it or heard about it happening to someone I cared about. My son Damon has been dating this incredible young woman named Valentina for about 8 months now. She's gentle, thoughtful, and genuinely kind-hearted. Type of person who brings homemade cookies when she visits and remembers everyone's birthdays without being reminded. Studies veterinary medicine and volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. I've been inviting them both over for Sunday barbecues regularly because I genuinely enjoy their company, and she reminds me of my wife when we first started dating. 6 weeks ago, Valentina showed up at our front door alone around dinner time, and the moment I saw her face through the screen door, blood ran cold. She had a split lip that was still bleeding slightly, a dark purple bruise covering her left eye and extending down to her cheekbone, and broken blood vessels that made both her eyes look terrifyingly red and swollen. I immediately brought her inside and got ice wrapped in a dish towel for her injuries while my wife called her sister to come over for emotional support. When I gently asked what had happened, trying to keep my voice calm despite the rage building inside me, Valentina broke down completely, confessed that Damon had done this to her during what started as a minor disagreement about her wanting to visit her family for her grandmother's birthday. I felt physically sick hearing this revelation, like someone had punched me in the stomach. The room started spinning as memories of my own childhood came flooding back. I embraced her carefully, mindful of her injuries, and apologized profusely for my son's actions, even though I knew my words couldn't undo the physical and emotional damage he'd inflicted. She explained through tears and shaking hands that this wasn't an isolated incident. He'd been getting increasingly aggressive and controlling over the past 2 months, starting with verbal insults and shoving during arguments, then escalating to grabbing her wrists hard enough to leave bruises, and finally to actual punching when she threatened to tell someone about his behavior. I called Damon immediately and demanded he come to the house right now. No excuses or delays. My voice was deadly calm, which my wife recognized as a warning sign that I was beyond furious. When he walked in 20 minutes later and saw Valentina's condition, he didn't even try to deny what he'd done or act surprised that she told us. Instead, he started making pathetic excuses about stress from his new job, claiming she'd been constantly provoking him, questioning his decisions, and nagging him about spending time with friends instead of her. He even had the audacity to suggest that she was exaggerating her injuries for sympathy. I positioned myself directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the fury in my eyes, and asked in a low voice why he thought it was acceptable to beat someone who loved and trusted him. Before he could fabricate another disgusting justification or try to minimize what he'd done, I struck him hard across the face with an open palm. The sound echoed through our living room like a gunshot. I didn't hold back or show any mercy. I wanted him to feel exactly what Valentina had experienced, the shock and humiliation of being hit by someone who was supposed to protect him. He staggered backward, clutching his reddening cheek in complete shock, and I told him he had exactly 30 minutes to pack his belongings and get out of my house permanently. I explained that any man who raises his hand against a woman, especially someone as sweet and defenseless as Valentina, isn't my son anymore. I'd rather have no child than have one who perpetuates the same cycle of abuse that destroyed my own childhood and traumatized our entire family for years. He tried arguing and pleading, claiming he'd change and get professional help, promising it would never happen again, but I'd heard those same empty promises from my stepfather countless times. They were meaningless words meant to buy time until the next explosion. I informed him that I was already helping Valentina contact her family and a lawyer to press charges, and that if I ever discovered he'd contacted her again through any means, personally ensure he regretted it for the rest of his life. Damon moved out that same evening, crying and begging for forgiveness right up until I physically escorted him to his car. I haven't spoken to him since, and I don't plan to unless he demonstrates genuine change through years of intensive therapy and taking full accountability for his actions. Some lines can never be uncrossed, and hitting someone you claim to love is